I want to let you know how we will be proceeding following last night's historic vote, and then answer any questions that you may have on this or any other topic that you'd like to bring up. Yesterday was a big day in the city of San Diego as we voted to strengthen San Diego's workforce by increasing our local minimum wage to $11.50 per hour and by allowing workers to earn sick leave. The impacts of this measure are significant. 279,000 San Diegans will now be able to earn sick leave. At least 172,000 San Diegans will get a raise on January 1st, which may increase to roughly 214,000 when wages reach $11.50 in 2017. San Diegans earning minimum wage will secure about $1,400 more per year thanks to the council's action yesterday. This translates into an additional $260 million a year into the pockets of low-income San Diegans, which they will then in turn spend on necessities like food, shelter, and clothing, which will help benefit our local economy. Indirectly, San Diego is stepping forward as a leader in respecting our workers and making sure workers are treated fairly. The next step in this process is to develop an enforcement policy that ensures that businesses complying with this measure and that there is not a competitive disadvantage from those who may choose to ignore this new law. I anticipate that this will be discussed sometime starting in September. I want to take a moment to put the potential enforcement costs into some perspective. First, let me remind you that the ordinance we passed last night is not the first ordinance ever approved in the city of San Diego that requires enforcement. It may be very well the most important one, though, and therefore worthy of investing with appropriate enforcement. Let me give you an example. The council recently approved the Neighborhood Parking Protection Ordinance, or the Oversized Vehicle Ordinance. This was a piece of legislation that was authored by then council member Kevin Faulkner. This law prohibits people from parking RVs and boats on our city streets for too long of a period of time. And does that impact our quality of life? Of course it does. And I supported it. We just budgeted $1.89 million to enforce it. $1.89 million to keep RVs off of our streets. Second, let me remind you that our ordinance that we approved last night will positively impact 172,000 San Diegans directly with a pay raise and 279,000 San Diegans with secure earned sick leave. Our independent budget analyst estimates that enforcing the minimum wage and earned sick leave ordinance will cost about $682,000 annually. Again, when compared to the $1.89 million we're now paying to enforce the RV parking rules, I think you all agree that this is an appropriate thing for us to move forward with. It remains my hope that the folks who stood in opposition to this common sense, reasonable compromise measure last night will join us in discussions instead of spending time wasting money, further fighting our efforts to strengthen San Diego's workforce. Yesterday's action was the result of 6 months of very concentrated effort, research, negotiations, civil dialogue, and compromise, and demonstrated what this city is capable of addressing. I want to publicly commend my council colleagues. I, of course, want to first draw attention to my 5 council colleagues who are with me in voting to support raising wages for our lowest paid workers. But I also want to thank my 3 colleagues who kept this dialogue civil and respectful while opposing the measure. There will be far more times when we agree on issues than when we disagree, and maintaining respect for all is important for further collaboration in the future, and of course it is good for our city. I look forward to additional actions on other bold and other items in the months to come, specifically the Climate Action Plan and addressing homelessness. With those comments, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Rory.
You said that you hope there won't be further fighting, but given that former Mayor Jerry Sanders is speaking now to members in the business community about what to do, what action to take, there likely will be further fighting, including perhaps a referendum. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do about that? Is this ever going to really see the light of day?
Well, it has seen the light of day. Supermajority of the council approved this measure last night. It is legal. It's been taken action. I can't help what special interests may choose to do to fight this particular measure, but a couple of things may come to mind. I think there may be better ways they can spend their time and their money than opposing a pay increase and providing sick leave to their employees. I also don't know that it's the best way to attract business to your hotel or to your restaurant to spend money telling everyone that you'd want your employees to work while they're sick. If they choose to fight this reasonable effort, I think it's appropriate that we make sure that San Diegans and visitors alike are aware of the positions of those opposing this. And I would just point out that there are plenty of employers who do support this increase. Most specifically, many of you were with me and Council Members Emerald and Leitner last night or yesterday when we had lunch at Jimbo's, Naturally, which is a local business who has voluntarily chosen to increase their minimum wage. So I think that there are plenty of people who will be backing up the council's action. Liam.
I know that for a while there were discussions about doing this as a ballot measure or as an ordinance. Can you explain why you folks went the ordinance route?
The question was, why did we go ordinance versus initiative? I think you know that when I proposed this 6 months ago in the State of the City address, I favored a ballot initiative. Two things I think happened. One is that through the analysis that the council directed, or the work that the council committee on economic development directed me to do with the city attorney, became clear that the council had the legal ability to do this as an ordinance. That was something that wasn't clear back in January when I gave the State of the City address. And then also in that time, you had council members come forward and said they wanted to go by ordinance. And much like the wage rate and the phase-in were compromises off the original proposal, the decision to go by ordinance instead of initiative was another aspect of the compromise that was enacted last night.
So you initially, or did you still prefer to go by ballot measure, or was this something sort of you gave on during negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say. I mean, again, my preference was to do it that way, but we had other council members that felt differently, and we were all giving to get where we want to be, which was to pass something that would increase wages for workers and provide earned sick leave. This was politics is the art of compromise, and that's what we did last night.
Well, most other cities have done ballot measures to raise their minimum wage. Do you feel like it's a little weaker that just the council approved it versus the voters sending a resounding yes, we want this?
Actually, I don't believe that's accurate. The question was, most other cities have gone by ballot. Seattle didn't do that. I believe there are other Bay Area cities that did not go that route. I think there'll be additional cities that will not choose to go that route. So I don't think San Diego is unique in that regard.
Why no exemptions, especially for tip employees? I've heard a lot about exemptions.
Yeah, you and me both. Maybe two things about that. Through a lot of the dialogue over the last number of months, many have come forward and said, basically, I support raising the minimum wage, but I'd like to be exempted from your measure. And that really is an open door that has no end, right? I mean, once you exempt one group or industry sector, where do you draw that line? And so that became difficult. And the minimum wage is meant to be a floor, right, upon which no one falls. And so by exempting particular groups, I think that really violates the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish by saying that we want to make sure that no one goes below a certain level. I think secondly, many of the folks who've argued for exemptions are the very same people who will say that administration costs need to be kept as low as possible. And we know that administering a program that is full of exemptions and other particular carve-outs will make it even more difficult to actually administer. And so this is the more simple and elegant approach, and that's why we chose to go the way that we did. I thought I saw a hand over here. Actually, sir, you haven't asked a question.
Yeah, I work with a home care company, and one of the biggest concerns or questions we have is with regards to billing and things like that. Is it going to be based upon where our office is located, where the client is located, or where the caregiver is located? Is that going to create different rates for different parts of the county?
Well, this obviously affects the city of San Diego. This is for folks who work a minimum number of hours within the city limits. These are, as we tackle the next phase of this, which is the enforcement mechanisms, we will have to address many of these particulars. But the city attorney has opined that it's where the employee works, and so that will be the case. And I appreciated your testimony yesterday and the nature that your industry is engaged on this particular matter. It's my understanding that a lot of the objections from the home care industry really revolve around the recently adopted AB 241, which makes this line of work subject to overtime rules, and that's really the driver of a lot of the additional personnel costs, not so much the minimum wage. This is an additional obligation that you're facing, but that change in Sacramento has proven problematic, which actually, Derek, I didn't fully answer your question before, and I apologize for that. You asked about tip credit, and California is one of 7 states in the country that don't allow for a tip credit exemption, and there was extreme concern amongst council members that to provide that particular tip credit would fly in the face of state law and potentially render our ordinance illegal. The city attorney opined, saying that we could potentially try to do that, but that would be susceptible to litigation. and as a result, we chose not to go that particular way. Just trying to get you more of that information. Yes, sir.
Going forward, is this the final numbers, or are we pursuing bigger, better numbers? What do you have looking forward?
Well, I appreciate that question. Is this the end, or is there more to come? You know, this is the action the council took, and there are voices out there in the community that would like to go higher. You saw many of them represented last night, calling for us to follow the leads of Seattle and now maybe Los Angeles by going to $15 an hour. I personally, in my discussions with small business owners in the community, I'm concerned about going that high that fast. And so I believe this is what the council adopted, this is what we will defend, and this is what we ought to do. Whether or not others want to pursue something more aggressive is something that the council, I don't believe, will take up. And perhaps back to Rory's question about, if you have a referendum, what may happen? Let me paint a couple pictures. First off is that you need to get roughly 34,000 signatures to achieve that, over a 30-day period. If that's successful, and I happen to think that probably a lot of San Diegans would not sign a petition to actually give themselves a pay cut, but say that it did, it would put the ordinance in suspense until June 2016. So that means that we will spend debating this issue for 2 years. If and when we're proven successful at the ballot box, which I believe that we would because this measure is so reasonable, business owners would have to assume 2 phases of pay increases immediately. And this is one of the concerns that a lot of business owners have told me they simply aren't capable of doing. Additionally, say we were to lose, it is my belief that there are groups in the community who feel very strongly they want to follow the lead of some other groups in other parts of the country to pursue a $15 an hour wage. So I think that everyone can see that this is a reasonable compromise that was adopted last night, and that we ought to embrace this and move forward with this rather than have a protracted battle that could have more unintended consequences for businesses in the future.
And I can tell you that Jerry Sanders is meeting right now, ostensibly saying we will make a decision as to what option we will move forward with very soon. So there is going to be something coming that they're going to try to block this.
We have certainly seen our fair share of referendum in San Diego of late. Doesn't make it right, and doesn't necessarily mean they'll be successful. We will deal with whatever comes. But again, I would caution people to understand what that option looks like and what its practical effects may be that ultimately I think would be more harmful to business.
But
Allison.
without even looking yesterday,
Mhm.
I ran into 2 business owners who told me that, one, we're still expanding, and these are pretty big businesses.
Mhm.
We're still expanding, but from now on, we're gonna just look outside the state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the second one said to me, we're looking at Oceanside and Carlsbad much more friendly toward us.
Mm-hmm.
These are businesses you wouldn't want to lose in San Diego. What do you say to them? Because they say they just can't handle this.
Mm-hmm. The pay increase,
Yeah,
the $1.50 pay increase.
yeah. They can't.
Here's what I'll say.
Bye-bye.
Here's what I'll say.
Okay.
You and I had lunch yesterday at Jimbo's. Jimbo's has voluntarily increased his minimum wage to $10 today, not a year from now, not 2 years from now. He's doing that while having recently opened a new store in downtown, and while I understand is considering an expansion to his facility in Carmel Valley. I don't believe that increasing wages means that your business won't thrive. In fact, you see companies like IKEA and Gap and others who pay a better minimum wage because they understand that it's good for business. Voice of San Diego recently fact-checked me, and I'll take mostly true, although I think every commenter suggested that it was more than true, that 80% of small businesses, according to research, says that they pay better than a minimum wage. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the belief that this is bad for business. In fact, I would think that people like Jimbo's, who's a pretty savvy business guy, knows that by paying a better minimum wage, that he's going to do better as a business. They say that because they have less costs with regard to attrition, training, things of that nature. And then I would just ask you to look at other communities that have done this. San Jose adopted an increased minimum wage. They basically did $2 overnight. When they did that, their unemployment rate actually fell. You've seen in communities where they have had it higher than the state or federal minimum wage, it has not been an economic detriment. I mean, these are not dying communities. San Francisco, San Jose, Seattle. These are vibrant communities that we compete against for other businesses, and who often have to make that choice. So I don't necessarily know that. I do respect that change is scary to people. I absolutely get that. But that's why we put a phase in on this, and so that we're not asking people to do it overnight, but to do it in phases over a reasonable amount of time so that they can accommodate those changes within their business model.
Gene Cuppison did that story yesterday about Jimbo's, and with all due respect, I think one of the remarks people made was that Jimbo's clientele is a little different than some other businesses insofar as they're not going to balk if that pay increase gets passed on to the customer.
Well,
just because of the clientele, but it might really affect some other businesses. So to Allison's point, there are some businesses who might say bye-bye because they might see it being.
Well, I'm going to push back against that because Jimbo has said that he is not passing this pay increase on to his consumers, that he is eating that within his own bottom line. So the price increases that you are anticipating Jimbo's customers having to deal with, they're not going to have to deal with because he's not doing that.
But the clientele is different, it was the point.
Understood. But here's the interesting thing. Prices have not held static during these recent years. While workers were not getting pay increases, it isn't as though my cup of coffee stayed the same price, right? I mean, so these prices have gone up. The question is, what is going on for the workers that are doing this? And this is why I think we've seen with the San Jose example, when workers have money in their pocket, they will spend that money in the community, and that's how you get a minimum wage increase with a reduction in unemployment, because people are spending this money. What our belief, or what we have some research that says that this will put about $260 million into the economy. When workers have money in their pocket, they tend to spend it. We think that will help make sure that this is not a negative for businesses, and that hopefully this is a boon to some of them.
Is it too premature to tell us how you would try to enforce this?
Well, no, actually, we have a full IBA report that was published last week and was heard and presented at the council meeting yesterday. It provided a menu of options for the city council to move forward with in terms of number of positions, what kinds of positions, how much we want to spend on that, how much we want to spend on public education. These are the kinds of discussions that the council is going to have to this gentleman's question from before, take on in the next number of weeks and months. And so that we can make sure that we do this right. We believe, forgive me, it's a lot going on in my head, but I think San Jose has done this with one position. I think San Francisco has done it with less than 10, I think, thereabouts. And so it depends. We're going to find the right solution for San Diego, just like we did with the wage rate and phase it. If Seattle feels as though $15 makes sense for them, that's good for them, and they're free to do that. We're going to make sure that what we do here in San Diego matches and benefits San Diegans the best, and we'll do that with the enforcement mechanism as well.
Procedurally,
James
since you went with the ordinance route, do you have to have a second reading?
We do.
And also, how long does Kevin Faulkner have to assign it or veto?
We do have to have a second reading. We believe we will have that second reading on July 28th, at which point the mayor will have 10 business days to veto, and that's next. Well, those are the answers to your questions.
If he doesn't sign it but doesn't veto it either after 10 days, what happens? If he just ignores it,
Well, it'll become law.
It'll just automatically become law. Okay.
You mentioned the June 2016 ballot. Is it not possible for enough signatures to be gathered to put it on this November?
No.
It's not?
No.
Just a
Liam?
quick follow-up to my earlier question. Why did you prefer a ballot measure approach than an ordinance approach?
Well, truthfully, at the time, that was the only option I understood we might have.
Right.
This was with very limited interaction with city staff. So, looking at other communities that have taken on this, they had gone by initiative. But this whole effort has been an exercise in compromise, and this was another one.
Right, but you said you gave on this as well as an effort that you compromised on, so this was still your preference to do a ballot measure, and so why? I'm just wondering.
Well, that was
why.
my initial proposal, but I think that we have made very clear that this is completely within the council's ability to do that, and that there were no legal impediments to doing so, and as a result, we have the ability to do it. We save the costs of an election by going this route, and we can provide this enhancement to workers potentially sooner by going this way. So I also think that there's some since the council has adopted this, we have the ability to make adjustments going forward as well. And so if we find that there are potential flaws or things that, as a practical matter, as they get implemented, need to be done differently, the council reserves that opportunity. It gives us more flexibility. Oh, take a couple more? Carlos hasn't asked a question yet.
Yeah, there has been a lot of situations on this, but we know that a huge percentage of those numbers that you gave, to 79,000, 279,000, 172,000 people, are Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
The labor force for this city, this county, and this nation, unfortunately, is the people that is down below.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this opposition that is going to come as a clash of classes? Are we being divided in this situation, and then the city's trying to do something, and then the people that they get the money, there are some ladies that have been working for the minimum wage for the past 15 years, and the owners are making a lot of money on that. But at the same time, is this a differentiation of classes?
I can't begin to speculate. Perhaps the motivation
It's not a
for
speculation; it's a reality.
no, but that's where I was going to.
Yeah.
Is what I do think I can tell you is that the world is changing, and that the economy, as it's stated, is evolving such that a lot of the employment growth is in the service sector, and these typically are jobs that don't pay as well. And when that is happening, I think that's why you're seeing this nationwide movement to tackle this issue, because the economy has changed. The job growth is in different sectors. And as a result, we as decision makers have to be aware of that. We have to talk to our constituencies and respond with good public policy. That's exactly what we're doing here. A lot of folks have talked to me about how minimum wage jobs are really for high school students and teenagers and whatnot. That's not my experience, and I think the statistics, the demographics point that out. You're talking about that these are people over 20 years old, by far, that many of them are working multiple jobs, and that it's not what it used to be. The world has changed. I look at the newspaper delivery guy is not a kid for me. When I've gone to a fast food restaurant, I don't see teenagers behind the counter. I see adults, and so that is the kind of change that we're responding to. Lastly, I would say, and to this came up a little bit in the public testimony last night, the belief that minimum wage jobs, should not be what you raise a family on. Certainly, it's not ideal. But the reality is, and Mr. Alvarez, I think, commented on this pretty well, it's not a concern about what we're speculating may happen. We're concerned about what is happening. And I think one of the problems that was brought out in the public testimony last night is that when you're working two jobs, it doesn't leave a lot of time to going to school to improve your circumstances. I think we've seen editorials and other things say, well, don't raise the minimum wage, just help people get better educated. Well, it can be pretty difficult to do that when you're trying to put that in between 2 or 3 jobs while raising a family, while utilizing public transportation to get to and from your jobs. So we're trying to create more circumstances so that folks can lift themselves out of this. I believe that we can continue to have the American dream in this country. And I think a part of it starts with trying to allow people who work a full-time job to not have to live in poverty. Yes, sir.
One last question on the home care piece, please. Can caregivers get sick leave if they aren't scheduled to work because of the erratic schedule? Oftentimes clients will get better, sometimes we lose them because they can't afford to stay in their homes anymore,
Sure.
or they pass away ultimately. So how does that translate over to the sick leave portion of it?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head, but I can have a member of my staff follow up with you if you wouldn't mind making sure we have your information. David?
The council had considered having the ordinance, 2 separate ordinances, one for sick leave and
Yes.
one for minimum wage. I'm guessing because of possible referendum. Why was it decided to do them in one enchilada?
I think it's keep it simple. I think a part of my refrain through all of this has been to try and keep this as simple as possible. Going back to the exemption question, I think Derek was trying to answer for earlier. People have wanted to get very, very fancy, very, very complex, and make this very, very difficult. I think, as within life, the best thing to do is keep things as simple as possible. By having one ordinance, we've achieved that objective.
But does it make you a little more vulnerable because they only have to gather signatures for one referendum as opposed to 2?
Well, I think that both measures would be popular on their own. I think combined, they are unbeatable. Guys, thanks for your time this afternoon. Carlos, I'm sorry, did you have a thought?
Do you agree that happy people is more productive?
The question is, do I believe that happy people are more productive? I'm a pretty happy guy. I think I'm fairly productive. But you don't take my word for it. When I've spoken to employers, and as I mentioned, many of them have shared with me that they don't pay minimum wage. They don't do it because they know that they want their employees to feel valued, to feel trusted, and to feel invested in. And so I think the answer to your question is yes, but you don't need that from the council president. You can ask that question to small business owners, and other employers across this community have told me that they specifically pay better because they know that's better for workers and better for their bottom line.
Can I ask you about something else for another reporter?
Only for you, Allison Ash.
It's a quick one. About the Horton Plaza, you
Yeah.
guys are gonna come up with some money for that. How did this get so messed up?
Oh my-
Allison
works for Channel 10. I don't know if you
I
know this or not,
I know,
but
I've been asked.
all
that.
you other stations love that I just said that. Okay. So here's the thing. We move forward with trying to create a world-class urban park in downtown in front of an old big box retailer. Trouble happened along the way. The state got rid of redevelopment, and that immensely complicated our plans, both in the ownership of the property, the construction of the facility, so on and so forth. Another thing happened. The economy started getting better. And let's remember that when you're doing your stories later today. The economy is getting better. And as such, the bids to construct that park have come in higher than we anticipated. We are not coming up with the money. It is our belief that this is the obligation of the state of California, because this was an enforceable contract between the city and the redevelopment agency to construct this park, that they are responsible for covering the additional costs. We are going to take that vote this afternoon. I'm hopeful the council will authorize staff to file that additional claim with the state of California, and then we'll take that case to the state. They have agreed in the past to similar kinds of situations to cover those additional costs. I hope that they will do that. If they do that, we can take advantage of the bids that we have now, start construction this fall, and have the project complete in 8 to 12 months. It is urgently necessary that we do this. Number one, because the park's gonna be really cool, and I think San Diegans deserve that. But probably more importantly in the short term, is we have a lot of small businesses around that proposed park that are suffering because of the lack of construction, a lack of completion of that project. And so we need the State Department of Finance to sign off on this additional request, as they've done for other jurisdictions. And then when they do, we can give San Diegans an urban park for the core of downtown that won't just serve downtown, it'll serve everyone, because it'll be just that cool. So stay tuned, 2 p.m. this
What
afternoon.
if they don't?
If they don't, then we're going to have a bit of a problem on our hands. We'll probably have litigation because we do feel strongly that the state is responsible for that additional cost. If we are unsuccessful in court, which I can't imagine we would, but if that were the case, then we probably have to look at either finding additional city resources, philanthropic resources, or reducing the scope of the project. I would be very much against reducing the scope of the project. We see a waterfront park that is world-class, that San Diegans are embracing, and so I wouldn't recommend value engineering this project and making it less of a public amenity. So stay tuned, but we feel we have a pretty good case to give to Sacramento.